This is the year we are going to transform this company into a significant step towards being a clean energy lifestyle company, to ultimately being a company that meets you, the customer, wherever you are on your clean energy journey, and we provide you with the technology you need to transform your life, your transportation, your home heating. We also rolled out EV chargers. We're working with smart panels. We're doing a lot of things to really help transform the home for the consumer so that they can have a dramatically improved relationship with energy.
So I want to know, a quick show of hands, how many of you would say that you have a good relationship with your local utility? Don't be shy. Nobody's looking at you. Most of you are looking at me. Nobody's putting their hands up. Okay, a good relationship with your... Okay, cool. And how many of you would further say that you understand how the utility executives that you need to work alongside are thinking about things like solar, storage, DERs, and virtual power plants? Raise your hands. You understand what they're thinking and how they're thinking. Not even John Delury's put his hand up. All right. I love the honesty in this room. I mean, it's less than 5% of you put your hands up. You know, how we inform ourselves and how we navigate this often tense relationship will in many ways determine the next decade of our industry. But we have a lot to be proud of so far. Not sure how many of you saw the news last week. SEIA announced the 5 millionth solar installation in the U.S. That's a pretty remarkable number. I started in the solar industry in 2006 when we had the Million Solar Homes program in California, and it was kind of still a pipe dream, wasn't it, Mary? It was like 1 million solar homes. That is so ludicrous. No utility executive thought it was reasonable that we would put incentives towards it, let alone declare it to come to pass. But we all appreciate the law of attraction. Did you know that 97% of those are rooftop installations, 97% of 5 million solar installations? And Keith stole my thunder, but what SEIA doesn't note in their data is that 1 in 5 of that 97% was installed by Sunrun. While there are many skill sets that Mary stands out with regards to her peers and her leadership skills, the one that I think is truly underappreciated is that, and many of you may already intuit this, but she's bilingual. She's bilingual. You see, Mary, as Keith pointed out, understands how the utility thinks because she ran one of the most progressive utilities. And if you listen to her episode on Suncast, it was not progressive when she became the leader by any stretch. She's been on the vanguard of how this industry propels forward this thing we call the energy transition, how we decarbonize the grid. And in that bilingual nature, she has learned to now translate the communication skills over to the private sector or the public sector and help our industry navigate that often complex, often very terse relationship. So in a very real sense, she is, in fact, bilingual. And you know, I think that she represents, in the truest sense, the group of folks that I've coined over the last 8+ years that we call solar warriors, entrepreneurs who leverage storage and solar and distributed energy technology to evolve what the grid is capable of. I would love it if you would give a warm welcome to Mary Powell. It's awesome to see you as well. It's an honor to finally share the stage with you. When we last met, it was over Zoom, as many of you no doubt have enjoyed. Mary, you have there's a saying that I think any Sunrun person, or frankly anyone following you on LinkedIn as a LinkedIn top voice, would know, and that is this notion of the customer-led revolution. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I want to start with, what do you believe Sunrun is emblematic of, or perhaps known for these days, versus when you first started watching and observing more than 6 years ago, before you joined the board, before you became the CEO? What do you think Sunrun is known for and emblematic of these days?
Well, first of all, it's so nice to be sharing the stage with you and to be here at this really important event. And again, I so appreciate, Nico, all that you do to advance this customer-led revolution. And yes, that is very much how I think of it. And it dawned on me way back in 2007, actually, that there had to be a way to create a more modern, technologically advanced, improved grid. Actually, that dawned on me way back when I first joined the utility space in the late 90s, to tell you the truth, because I took the job, I went out and about, and I saw this 100-plus-year-old way of thinking about delivering energy. And then I saw climate change sweeping in at the same time. And it was so obvious to me that there was literally no way that we could rely on that system of energy delivery to be the most cost-effective, to be the most resilient, to be the most powerful for consumers. So again, around 2006, 2007, as I was stepping into the role of CEO, I think that's when I first coined that we need a customer-led revolution to a more effective way to power the grid of the future. And one of the things, back to your question on Sunrun, one of the things I love about what we're doing is we definitely have, over the last couple of years, dialed up our customer obsession incredibly. In fact, I'm just so excited. We're hitting some of the highest net promoter scores in the company's history, which is just so powerful and so important. So important to me that the transformation, every transformation I've ever been part of leading, if you don't have the customer at the center of it, I actually don't know why you're doing it. So from my perspective, really dialing up that customer obsession to dial up the customer-led revolution is so key. But the other big practical transition we've made is we declared going into last year that it was going to become the year of storage. So Sunrun had been installing storage for years, but really as a side gig. Like, the reality is we were known as a solar company, and 10% of the time maybe we were selling you a battery as well. And last year at the beginning of the year, we declared this is the year of storage. This is the year we are going to transform this company into a significant step towards being a clean energy lifestyle company, to ultimately being a company that meets you, the customer, wherever you are on your clean energy journey, and we provide you with the technology you need to transform your life, your transportation, your home heating, all of that in a way that is very customer obsessed. And we were using storage as the lead into that. And I'm just so thrilled to say that, again, we were at, low teens attachment rate. And now we've hit 50% of our customers are also getting storage
in the
attached.
last year, since
in the
declaring
last
the
year,
year of storage.
yes. And we also rolled out EV chargers. We're working with smart panels. We're doing a lot of things to really help transform the home for the consumer so that they can have a dramatically improved relationship with energy.
One of the things that stands out for me is to have a customer-led revolution, you need customers who are self-aware enough to know that they need to revolutionize the way they think about electricity. How do, as the number one brand and installer of solar and clean energy in the U.S., how do you all think about that education process and bringing those customers into the revolution? Because frankly, we've got less than a 5% penetration rate across the U.S., which I'm grateful for. It was less than 1% when we all began this journey. And I remember when it was less than 1/10 of 1%. So how do you enroll those customers to believe that they're part of that revolution?
Well, Nico, that's an excellent point. You really have to get to that tipping point. As we see with any customer-led revolution. So to me, it's not so much about how we convince them per se. It's not so much like when we think as consumers why all of a sudden we start buying X, Y, or Z, or why all of a sudden everybody starts buying this type of vehicle or that type of clothing, or it is really because it has become more of a Main Street item. So one of the things I'm really thrilled about is I am seeing real signs that clean energy is becoming, the way I describe it is, I feel like when I first got into this, when I first incented customers way back in 2007, I actually proposed as a utility executive to the regulators to pay customers to go solar. So riddle me that in this world that we're in, where everybody says it's a cost shift. We actually proved the math that it wasn't, and that we wanted customers to go solar, right? But back then, solar was something that the way I described it was that thing that like at Thanksgiving dinner, your weird uncle talked about and you kind of couldn't wait for him to stop, right? It was a kind of geeky, more fringe thing. And now, when I'm on the floors of Lowe's with our folks selling and talking to customers, when I'm out and about sitting in customers' living rooms all across America, I call customers every single week of Sunrun. I have a random selection that I do and I reach out. You're hearing very different voices. It's not that anymore. You're hearing things that to me, I'm hearing things that are really suggesting that people are starting to get the massive benefits of, particularly, I would say, the ability to not just generate your own clean energy, but to store it and have incredible resilience. I mean, look at what happened in Texas last week. I mean, my entry to the utility business was during this Northeast ice storm. That really shaped my thinking a lot about the grid of the future, because that ice storm took out transmission towers that connected Canada and the United States of America. Like climate change isn't just this like random thing that can't touch this massive grid. It is incredibly powerful, and it means that we need to be working hard to accelerate solutions. So I think as those aha moments happen for customers, as we see these events, as they see their neighbors and families and friends with a more perfect power than they can get from the utility, I think you're going to continue to see adoption.
One of the things I've appreciated in observing from afar and then engaging with your communications team is how really hands-on you are, and your management style doesn't speak of someone who is in an ivory tower running the largest solar company, one of the most renowned publicly traded clean energy companies. You have been on the ground, boots on the ground, literally in the living rooms of your customers. I've heard a tale that you even sit at the reception desk in the San Francisco office as your personal desk. Everyone here is trying to run a business that in some way services or competes with Sunrun in the marketplace. But what we all have in common is that we have to learn to manage expectations and teams and enroll these customers. What about this management style that you've embraced at Sunrun complements this notion of the customer-led revolution? Can you talk a bit about the importance that you see and that anyone here running their business can tap into in that way to try and encourage their team to do likewise? Because one of the things I believe is that it doesn't need to be just the CEO who's the LinkedIn top voice or who's out in the community speaking on behalf of our cause, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I could talk for so long. So I'm like trying to distill.
Let's get the 3 to 5 minutes.
Distill it down. So I would say, first of all, my career was a jungle gym, which really informed a lot my leadership style. So I call myself the accidental executive because I actually never aspired to be in business. I thought it was kind of sad. So I grew up in the arts. But I fell in, and then I went up super fast. We grew up a fund from $200 million to $3.5 billion in 7 years. And within 7 years, I was leading the operations of a $3.5 billion fund. And then I left. So I've done, and every time I made a job change, except this most recent one, I would go down deeper in the organization. And to your point, what I would find is, wow, leaders have like no clue what's going on in their companies. Like that's what it taught me. Like I did it over and over again, and I was like shocked. And the thing I hated the most was when they would have these town hall meetings with employees, and it was so scripted, and like the poor sucker that thought they could actually ask a real question, like usually lost their job within a month. Like it was disgusting. Like it just was like, and so it really informed and I think one of the scariest things, you guys, about leadership or any kind of power that you achieve in your life is how it can distort you. And that's another thing I saw, and it really scared me, to tell you the truth. I saw people that as they became more powerful, whether it was in politics or in business, they became a shadow of their former self, and I didn't like the shadow. So a big part of what has always informed me is to always be putting myself in situations that make me feel incredibly vulnerable, and put myself in situations where I'm uncomfortable. And to help other leaders I work with do that, because to me, that's really where you get the power to transform. You get the power to have a much deeper understanding of your organization, of the people you serve, the people you serve with. So it is yes. So yes, I have not had an office for probably 20 years of my career. I actually think they block you from the most important things. They're about safety and security. They're not about vulnerability and connection and occasionally being uncomfortable. So so our whole leadership team, it's not just me, the top 100 leaders of Sunrun make calls to customers every month. So it's something that I also espouse. I haven't eliminated private offices at Sunrun like I did at the utility. At the utility, it was absolutely necessary. Nobody had a private office. Like that was the only way you were going to get a more innovative mindset there. But yeah, it's a core tenet to keep it real.
I love that, to keep it real. Let's talk about the Midwest a bit. Obviously, we're here in Illinois. Sunrun has opened a new office, a relatively new office in the fall in Peoria, and it speaks to the growth of the local solar market. So I'd love to know on sort of both sides of the conversation. One, what you're proud of about the Illinois market and what you see happening here, and then what we can extrapolate from what's happening here with CEJA and the focus on those who traditionally wouldn't have been prioritized for clean energy, what the rest of the nation should be paying attention to that is happening here in the Midwest.
There's a lot. I mean, I love the Midwest. My mom's from the Midwest, so I spent a lot of time in Michigan growing up, and and one of the reasons I say that is because talk about like keeping it real. I always feel like it's a keep it real, pragmatic, like let's just have the conversation. Let's just get something done. And that's very much what I see happening on the policy front. Like, I love it. I feel like Illinois is leading the way in thinking about, obviously solar is as an integral part of the RPS, really thinking about this energy transition, not just in the sense of accelerating the customer-led revolution, but doing it in a way that builds the workforce of the future. Thinking of it in a way that is about customer obsession. So really building in, consumer confidence as a part of how we think about it. And then, of course, valuing these incredible resources, which again, one thing that does sadden me on some days and annoy me on other days, but like I literally can't believe that I was part of a team that proved 10 years ago that these assets have incredible value for the grid. And I literally can't believe that we're still in the situation of proving that. And so again, what Illinois is doing is very, very important in terms of putting a stake in the ground of the value of the energy transition.
I'm so glad you went there, actually, because the conversation I want this to evolve into is this idea of bilingualism. Of course, it's a metaphor for being able to navigate this conversation between the utility and the energy system culture, the evolution of our architecture. Last fall, you wrote a piece, I want to read from it, actually, on the Illinois market. And you said, home solar and storage is one piece of the puzzle, but it's proving to be a larger piece than anyone expected. With networked home solar and storage systems, Illinois can fully realize the many benefits of these distributed power plants, lowering costs for all users of the grid by mitigating the need, emphasis mine, mitigating the need for utilities to invest in additional infrastructure. I have a question, but if you want to just comment on that.
No, go. What's the question?
I want to know if you can expound on what it means for how we view home, solar, and storage, in particular, the strengthening of the grid and our relationship with those who manage that grid.
Yeah. So again, so much to unpack there. But, again, one of the stunning things that we know, right, about the grid is it is incredibly economically inefficient. Like you literally couldn't create a more economically inefficient system
from a utility executive.
If you tried, right? Like, and that's actually what should terrify any utility executive the most. Because the scariest place for any utility should be in a rate increase hearing, right? And so like what really frightened me as somebody who cared a lot about society cared a lot about cost effectiveness for the customers I served, was staring at the future and seeing a future that was absolutely clear the grid was going to become more expensive. There was like because it's economically inefficient. And then we were adding in a lot of massive solutions, right? We have 10% of the resources on the grid are built for 1% of the time, right? Like that is stunning. 10% for 1%. And then we have had the most massive transmission build out over the last decade that, again, many of us saw coming, right? And that all ultimately is continuing to accelerate the economic inefficiency of the grid. So, yes. So, and actually, you'll notice in what I wrote there that I talked about it as distributed power plants. Because I'm always thinking about like, okay, how can we talk in ways that like utilities will get more? Like, and I really honestly think this whole, they are virtual power plants, but I was like, hey, there's nothing virtual about them.
They're very real.
They're actually way better than those peaking plants that I had to own and operate and build as a utility executive. Like it is way better to have a bunch of networked solar and stored energy capacity that is so much more reliable. Because the thing about a peaker is, guess what? It either goes on or it's off, right? Like we've proven with our pilots and with our programs we've done, we've proven that like when you have 16,000 customers enrolled, guess what? If a couple of those resources don't show up, whatever, like all the other resources do, it is way more flexible, reliable, and powerful than the traditional utility solutions.
I wish we had more time. I could do this for at least another 30 or 40 minutes.
Clearly I could too.
I want to take a moment and talk about, there's sort of two things that I want to talk about before we wrap. The first is, where is the utilities role in this customer-led energy revolution that we're experiencing?
Yeah, well, let's to be fair to the utilities, because I have some good friends that work for you. Like, to be fair, even when you have, I would say, a more enlightened leader who actually sees the benefit of change, the reality is the whole culture, the 100-plus-year-old model, is built for slow and no. Like literally slow and no. The reason I had to move on from Green Mountain Power after so many years and loving the work that we did is I honestly couldn't stand the accolades we were getting relative to the relative speed at which we were moving. So even a small, innovative utility in a smaller, more collaborative than most states, right? The pace of change as a utility is painful. All right. So, because it's built for slow and no. That's one of the reasons I get terrified about, like, if we don't embrace or it's why I don't. I actually think we are going to have to embrace distributed resources, because right now, with how load is growing, like the utility space would have to build like 34 new nuclear plants to meet that demand in the next 5 years. Like, it took me 5 years just to build one, like, modest wind farm in Vermont. Right? The system is built for slow and no. So I still love to see any innovation I see, but it also puts a tremendous amount of responsibility with regulators. Like, and so I get probably a lot more excited when I see innovative, progressive regulators or meet them than when I do utility executives, because they have such an important role in creating that momentum, because that is ultimately what utilities respond to the most is, the regulatory construct. So again, it's why I so admire some of the work that's happened in Illinois. We've all seen what happens when they don't get it right, like in California. So it's just really, really critical.
Sunrun has been praised for leading the solar and storage attachment into the virtual power plant arena. It's something that the industry has been, I'll say, dreaming of and looking forward to for quite some time. Your power plant in California is, I think overall, Sunrun has the largest virtual power plant in the nation.
Yeah.
And you have, you've doubled now from 8,500 batteries in California to just announced going to 16,200 customers enrolled. Is this the future of what it looks like for everyone here who's installing solar and attached, let's call it home electrification devices? I guess the underlying question I have is, I'd love for you to talk about the examples of Luma and PG&E recently that you guys have been able to really truly support the grid and the utility. But also, is this feasible for a company that's just focused on Illinois or just focused on Iowa or just focused on one market?
Absolutely. So back to, again, when I first embraced this revolution as a utility executive, I was at the launch with Elon and his team of the Powerwall. We were the first to get Powerwalls into homes way back in 2015. So yes, I think it should be. Ultimately, we should be moving to a system where, it's no longer this like very paternalistic model of, we build everything and we decide how to supply it, but moving much more to sort of, as I think of it, a symphony. And there's a lot of different instruments that play at different times and have different values. So the programs we're doing are incredibly valuable, Nico, not just to the customers who participate. So yes, we took the PG&E one from 8,500 to 16,000 customers are participating. We helped in Puerto Rico just, I think, last week before, we helped prevent blackouts on a routine basis.
5 days in a row.
Yeah, 5 days in a row. So it is incredibly powerful. And so what I've always seen is going to happen is the grid is not going to be able to meet the demand. And then what is going to happen is they are naturally going to be pushed towards needing our resources. So a big part of how I think about being a clean energy lifestyle company is moving as fast as we possibly can to creating the whole home and the vehicle as smart, controllable load for the utility. And the Brattle Group, they came out too with their numbers that just in California alone, we could save the grid $750 million a year just by leveraging these distributed assets. So the evidence is there. The utilities will be either wanting to or being forced to utilize these resources. So thinking about that as somebody in this business is very, very important.
I wish we had more time. I want to preemptively congratulate you for your soon-to-be millionth customer. 933,000 customers is a tremendous milestone and growing at a really impressive clip right now. Mary,
we install 3 megawatts a day. Like that's just wild when you think. Like when I think of that as a former utility executive, there's nothing I could do to ramp up 3 megawatts a day.
I love that.
Yeah.
Mary, if you could leave every person you meet with one thing, what would it be?
That's easy. Love. I feel like that's, one of the people I follow too is Sammy Roth at the LA Times. And I loved I'll get it wrong, but the title I thought of his piece was really like, why can't we all just get along? I think we need to focus a lot more on what's possible. We need to focus a lot more on love and connection. I bumped into somebody coming to this event actually, and it just struck me, like even in our own industry, like we go straight to the negative. It was like, it just like we and as a society, we focus so much on the negative. And so I've just always been a big believer in the power of possibility, love, and connection. So
Mary Powell is the CEO of Sunrun, and it has been truly an honor and a pleasure to get a chance to spend time with you today. Thank you all for taking time to be here.